Hi people, thank you for stopping by at Building Wealth with Rajiv. Here is my chat with Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan. Mr. Gopalakrishnan has authored more than 20 books on leadership and management. He has had a very successful corporate career too. He was vice chairman of Unilever India, and now he serves as board member on several Tata Group companies. We talked about his success and corporate journey. There are some fascinating learnings on leadership and management. Although many of them are in Indian context, I think they are timeless and useful for everybody. I hope you like the content. If you like the content, please share your views on leadership. Also follow the channel. What top three companies you admire, for corporate practices, for creating shareholder values, for developing leaders?
But the ones I would mention in response to your question are TCS,
Okay.
which was founded by Mr. late Fakir Chand Kohli and followed by Mr. S. Ramadurai. HDFC Group, which was really transformed by Deepak Parekh. And Marico, which is founded and transformed by Harsh Mariwala. So you said three, I'll keep it to those three. Though I can add Biocon, Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, so that there's gender parity and nobody thinks that. And we've written a book on Kiran Mazumdar Shaw also. And Uday Kotak, who's
Okay.
founded the Kotak Mahindra
Kotak
Bank.
Mahindra. Okay.
So we wrote a sixth one, which is about Larsen and Toubro and how Anil Naik transformed his
Okay.
trajectory.
Why do you think these four companies came on the top for you?
And we found 8 attributes. I'm not going to talk about all the 8, otherwise I'll spend a
Hmm.
lot of time. They are all published as books, 6 different books, which are, in fact, some of them are here. You can see them.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen
Uh,
them.
uh, but the first 3 I would like to mention,
Sure.
which were common amongst all these 6 companies, and they were number one, high people orientation. High people orientation. The second one was a very acute degree of critical thinking. And the third one is an ability to consider short term and long term simultaneously.
Which you talked about the balancing the short term, long term. What's that? I think that if you like to elaborate with some examples, that would be great.
But when I meet company managers, I see a lot of them who say, "Yaar, roz ka kaam karte karte thak jate hain." They know who can think of long term.
Mm-hmm.
But what distinguished these people was their ability to do both simultaneously. So there are fires to be fought. Working capital is out of control, but you have to still think of the long term. So, uh, if I take as an example, take say Harsh Mariwala in
Mm-hmm.
Marico.
Mm-hmm.
As he very self-deprecatingly describes himself, he says, "I'm only a mere BCom."
Mm-hmm.
Matlab, he's not studied in Wharton and Harvard and all that sort of stuff. And he says, so I had the humility of ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
When I was surrounded by Maharathis who had come back with fancy degrees, IIM, ye, vagara,
Mm-hmm.
And when he entered his family business back in the early 1970s, it was a bulk commodity business, which is very
Mm-hmm.
common amongst uh,
Marwadis.
Marwadis and Baniyas and so on.
Mm-hmm.
They were selling their parachute oil in 15 kilo drums,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody down the supply chain would break it up and sell it in 100 grams, 200 grams.
Mm-hmm.
And he walked around the market and found that whereas he was selling it at, say, 10 rupees a kilo, the 200-gram pack would sell at the rate of 20 rupees a kilo. So he
Mm-hmm.
said, why am I not doing this? There was tremendous family resistance to this idea because it was somehow felt that this consumer product marketing, FMCG stuff is different. It's not our cup of tea. We are very good at bulk and commodity.
Mm-hmm.
And we've described in the book how he had to fight through that without upsetting the family, by the way. I mean, if you want to have jhagada and walk out, that doesn't require much imagination.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to manage the situation so that he could branch out on his own and sell small quantities in much vaster units to be able to make a very profitable company.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an example of how you could manage short term and long term simultaneously. I want to give you one more example of short term and long
Sure.
term. I'll take it also from Marico so that I don't have to repeat the background. Um, Marico was soon dubbed. It had an IPO, I think, in 1998 or thereabouts. So I'm talking of, say, a few years before that. People talked of Marico as an FMCG company. And then people would comment saying, what will you do as an FMCG company? You'll be slaughtered and you'll be eaten for breakfast by Hindustan Lever, Procter and Gamble, Richardson Hindustan, various Maharathis of international fame. And he said they were right. The resources available for the big companies, I would never be able to match their advertising expenditure. And then a question came to his mind. Do I want to be a small fish in a big pond or a big fish in a small pond? That's a very strategic long-term question. And although I make it sound very slick, as though he got an aha feeling in the night, he came to the conclusion, if I try to become a small fish in a big pond, then the big fish in the big pond will eat me up. I'd rather be a small fish, a big fish in a small pond. And he started doing what niche areas. So, for example, he never got into detergents. He never got into toothpaste. He said, the moment I do that, Hindustan Lever, Nirma, everybody will come and finish me off. But he went and bought a brand called Medicare from, at that time, Richardson, Vicks, or Procter and Gamble. It is a medicated shampoo. So it's in the hair grooming area. And they found it to be too small to occupy their interest because big companies, you work for Unilever, they want some scale. He bought Medicare for a certain sum of money, which I can't remember offhand. It's a very niche market for those who got lice in their hair. It's medicated shampoo. And from there, he made Medicare hair oil. He made Medicare shampoo, Medicare conditioner, Medicare grooming, so that, some people like Dettol soap and some people don't like Dettol soap. And that's become a very successful brand. Nobody else has entered it because they say, yeah, medical ke saath takkar nahi lena hai. Or if they are a Unilever or a Procter and Gamble, they say, itna chota sa market hai, what is this? Why should we go there? So he's a big fish in a small pond. He then created what I call the WAHO market, value added hair oil, where everybody is selling coconut oil, which of course our tradition tells us coconut oil is very good for your hair. But it froze in winter. And he said, how do I keep it liquid? Because it's a bit of a nuisance, especially once you gone to plastic bottles, you have to put it into hot water. In the old days, you would sort of put some, spoon out some, and then put it on the tawa. And Vaho means he's adding mineral oil to vegetable oil so that its freezing temperature is changed. And then it doesn't freeze in the winter. So you can imagine if you're from Delhi, getting up early in the morning and finding the white frozen coconut oil, which you have to heat and then only apply to your hair. And he created a whole Vaho market where Parachute is the leading brand. So I've given just 2 or 3 examples from one company just to make it more focused for the purpose of our discussion of how you can manage the long term and the short term simultaneously.
We have, for example, a Microsoft, or these are anyway big company, but there are hundreds of American companies going all over the world. It's not that the market is small for them in America. Why the Indian companies are not able to, you know, go abroad and get success or become truly multinational? What do you say about that?
So the principal way in which foreign companies have entered India is they get an idea which they then roll out over the world. So Unilever makes Sunlight, Lifebuoy, Rexona, soap, Surf. When you go to Germany, it may have a different name. It may have a different name in Italy, but basically the masala is the same.
Hmm.
And they learn a lot of experience saying this works in Italy, it doesn't work in Spain, etc.
Hmm.
So either you must have an idea which you can roll out, and the example of that is Bajaj, an example of that is TCS. The idea of offshore delivery, they've rolled out. They are in Mexico, they are in Argentina, they are in Brazil, they are everywhere. Or you develop something for that market
Hmm.
specifically.
Hmm.
If I take Unilever, where I worked and I've been a part of that journey, they made Fair and Lovely for brown people like us.
Hmm.
When I was director of exports, I said, well, there are brown people outside India also, not just the ethnic Indians,
Hmm.
but the Sri Lankans, the Pakistanis, why even some Arabs? So with a great deal of trepidation and opposition, I launched Fair and Lovely in Dubai, in Cairo, in Doha, and Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka, Singapore. Um, and I found it's working. People want to buy Fair and Lovely. It's not just the ethnic Indians. The Arabs love it. To the point where in Cairo, the local company, Unilever Egypt, has taken it over. It's no more an export from India. The formulation is from India. The technology development is in India. So we globalize an idea. Obviously, you're not going to sell it to Sweden. So I think it's the arrival of an idea that is portable through the world. And since Indian companies, I told you only 90, 19,000 have a turnover of 10 crores. I mean, you need some muscle in your body to be able to.
Mm.
The reason why Ramanathan Krishnan never went beyond semi-finals is because he was using Bata canvas shoes of 6 rupees 50 paise. The other guys were using cushioned Nike or whatever was the equivalent in those days. But
Mm.
today you see our young players, they are much better equipped and they can afford to um, pay for those things. So I think it's a process.
Okay. Okay. I think it makes sense. Now, tell me, I think just your one or two things from your own experience, your great legacy, Mr. Gopal. Give me an example of a crisis situation you faced, which kind of you come out with, and I'm talking about professional crisis management. You came out of it and felt that a half factor of winning it over and getting some lessons out of it.
I'll give you two examples. One is very
Sure.
personal. Personal
Mm.
meaning not in my family domain, with my
Mm.
to do with my profession. And the second where I was a principal actor. And the
Mm.
second one was where I was not the principal actor, but I was very much a person with a seat at the table, so that you
Mm.
see the contrast. Uh, the one that where the first example, I was the director of export. And in those days, Hindustan Lever had an export commitment under FERA.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to recruit all sorts of people who were from different domains. Like we were exporting hand knotted carpets, we were exporting clothing. Hindustan Lever had no expertise. So we would recruit people from those industries. As you know, people working in those industries come from smaller units and they have
Mm-hmm.
a different way of working compared to Hindustan Lever. I wouldn't say all of them are crooks, but there are enough crooks there. Now, one of the things that a large company like Hindustan Lever or Tata's does is to recruit people and then induct them into their way of thinking, to influence their mindset ki bhai, the way we
Mm.
work here is this. Anyway, we recruited a senior manager who's very expert in textiles and he knew a lot about textiles. And I was full of giving people a free hand. But you can give a people a free hand, you can let your child go out and play if you're keeping an eye on the child. You can't just say, I've given my
Mm.
child a free hand.
Mm.
I once discovered that I have lost $1 million.
Oh
Lost
gosh.
meaning we can't find it.
Mm.
And when my CFO came and told me he can't find it, I said, bloody hell, what the hell does that mean? Through the confusion that inevitably came uh, in the next 2, 3 days, I won't go into every single detail. It was confirmed that the $1 million wasn't there. Whether it was under invoicing, over invoicing, with all the implications that happened with that. And I had a choice. I could say, dig deeper and get me more facts, which is the natural thing that professional managers tend to do. The second thing I could do is to say, well, something has happened, I'll pass the buck to somebody else. And the third thing is, whether it's my personal fault or not, it's not that my bank account is richer by $1 million. I better go and admit that as a leader, I take the responsibility and get help in solving the mess because there'll be a mess. So I went to my chairman, and don't forget, at 42 or 41, I had already become a director of Hindustan Lever. In those days, it was a big deal. And I looked vulnerable and I looked like a guy who didn't know what happened. And directors are not supposed to look like that. They're supposed to look like sab janta walas who
In
got
control.
steely blue eyes.
Mm.
My chairman saw my face and he said, something has gone wrong. This guy is asking for help. This is not the time to bang him on the head.
Mm-hmm.
And the finance department, the treasury department, the legal department, everybody came and a team was formed. And it took us about 6 months, 1 year. We never got the $1 million back. But I learned a lesson out of it. They didn't fire me, they actually promoted me 2 years later. That was very kind of them. I should have been fired. And the lesson I learned out of that is a crisis comes to you in your professional work, and then how you respond can make a big difference. If you To admit an error is not a sign of weakness. It is not admitting an error that's a sign of vulnerability and weakness. And if you apply that logic to what's happening in other countries, including our own, where leaders fail to accept responsibility, at the end of the day, the buck stops with you. I was the director export. Some malfeasance has happened. While I didn't do the malfeasance, I should be willing to accept it. Once you accept it, people are willing to help you. It's only when you put on your tau and tadi and you know behave like a Khap Panchayat leader, then people say he's going to out to fix you. You get a different outcome. So that's one example. The second example I would like to give is when I was on the board of Hindustan Lever, and I was not the center of this, unlike the first example. We had merged Brook Bond, Lipton, everything was part of Unilever. And we were not used, we meaning the headquarter of Hindustan Lever in India was not used to tea plantations and Assam and Ulfa and Sulfa and all the problems that are happening in us. And we then found that our manager there had been threatened that if he did not pay a certain sum of money, um, he would be shot.
Mm-hmm.
And this was, of course, very worrying for us. We could not react in a panic, getting everybody. If you got the manager out, what about the deputy manager? What about the, garden manager? We could not say go to hell because then God knows what will happen. And we worked on a strategy in the company led by the chairman and the external relations director, where we sought help from the intelligence bureau and said, this is a problem. How do you think we should react? And to cut a long story short, this has been now written up as a case study. Anyway, it's 40 years old. With the help of the Indian Army, none other than General Brar, K.S. Brar, who became famous for the Golden Temple episode in 1984.
Okay. Yeah.
We managed to airlift all our employees and their families under the nose of the Ulfa Sulfa fellows. And the lesson that it taught me is when you're really faced with a difficult choice, your people orientation must show. It costs a lot of money. You have to reimburse for all that. But it is more important. You might have spent 50 lakhs and that might have been the ransom. One way could have been, yahan 50 lakh kharcha karne baad wahan par kar do. But how you spend your money is also important. The process is as important as the end outcome. And it was a crisis. We were absolutely, every morning we'd get up and say, God knows what you're going to hear from yesterday's information. But luckily, not a single life was lost. And it became, of course, like a whodunit. If they had Netflix in those days, they would have made a movie on it.
The top three qualities in a leader. What will make a exceptional leader or leave exceptional a good leader for you?
भाई तेज तो होना चाहिए उसमें. There's nothing to describe. I don't have to tell you that he has to be smart or intelligent at something.
Those are basics.
Those are basics. So I'm not going to go into that. I think the top other two qualities, apart from the usual, the self-evident ones, are namrata.
Okay.
Humility. That's sorely lacking, including in myself, minus 30 years. Because when you are in the position of power, namrata is a word which you use only to give the name to your granddaughter. Otherwise, it is not a word you refer to in the morning. right? It's nice to play with your granddaughter and call her Namrata, but it is not part of your weaponry or your skill set. After you retire, you realize that I could have been no more Namra. And humble people are not non-achievers. But when you're in the corporate sector or even in a political position, when you are in the peak of it, you think humility is the sign of a loser.
Mm.
So I add a lot of value to Namrata. And the last one I would suggest, I would give only two, Namrata and Insaniyat.
Okay.
Humanity. You must be fair to human beings. And the example I gave of this tea estate, mark of humility. My mark of humility is not a person who's very soft spoken and quiet,
Mm-hmm.
but the person who comes close to and avoids the disaster because he has learned from it.
Any corporate leader comes to your mind as a leader you would look up to?
But in that respect of what I just said, Ratan Tata would be one person,
Okay.
Deepak Parekh would be another person. Certainly, I would say these people. They are not perfect people, by the way. I'm mentioning them because somebody else who may listen to this may have a different opinion on this. But in respect of being humble and learning from their brushes with humiliation, I would certainly include people like Deepak Parekh, Satish Dhawan, who was the chairman of ISRO many years ago, Abdul Kalam, who was president of India. But I'm going into the just beyond the corporate, but not so
Mm.
far away from corporate.
You've been so successful in corporate world. Now, what is your suggestion to, let's say, a manager level person or to succeed in the corporate world? What ingredients is needed? Is it what you just talked about, humility, smartness, IQ, EQ? Is there anything else you have?
I don't know if I've been successful. Some people will think so, some people may not think so. So I'm leaving
Mm,
that part of the
mm,
question aside. But what I tend to tell young people, younger than me,
mm,
that there comes a stage in your career when your EQ must exceed your IQ.
mm,
And there comes a stage in your career when your IQ must exceed your EQ.
mm,
Not must, it will.
mm,
So your first part of your career, you have to show कि भाई मैं बड़ा मस्त हूँ. I am very clever.
mm,
IQ greater than EQ. You
mm,
run over, you run your truck over a few dead bodies because you want to get things done. You want to show that you're an aggressive guy.
mm,
Bill Gates minus 30 years, 40 years.
mm.
He was not a very pleasant fellow to deal with.
Oh, bit of a rookie, smart, arrogant about themselves, and a
And
forward like.
all of us have those traits.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
using
true.
Bill Gates only because
Yeah,
he's a
yeah,
known
yeah,
name.
yeah.
IQ far exceeds EQ.
Mm-hmm.
And then as your career moves, the IQ, since it can't keep on increasing, you can't get smarter and smarter. It sort of levels off. And your EQ, which is lower, starts to sort of increase. And that crossover point is about the age of 45, 50. And you have to allow it to happen. Whereas most people try to think, oh, the technologies are changing, younger people are smarter in artificial intelligence. You try to learn more and more and to maintain your EQ, and you ignore your IQ. So let your EQ cross your IQ if you want to be in a leadership position. Good leaders, I would rather select as a CEO a person with high EQ and modest IQ than the other way around.
Makes
When
sense.
when you interview people, you look for high IQ. Oh, to tell me what all have you done in your career? Oh, you were vice president, you were director there. What did you do? What are your accomplishments? How did you increase the sales by 30%? IQ questions we ask. We rarely ask him an EQ question. You leave that to the psychologist if there's one on your panel, or an HR guy who will ask him some twisted question to find out.
Or there are
uh, yeah,
personality tests.
I mean, I remember one of the quotes from the books that we have written. I think it is Deepak Parekh who said it. No, Uday Kotak. Uday Kotak. He said, we recruit average people to help them to become extraordinary people. And we do that by recruiting people for values and training them for skills. Most people are recruiting people for skills, hoping to train them for values. And the example I gave of my stint as a director of exports was exactly that. I recruited a guy because he knew a lot about carpets or garments or whatever. He had skills. I said, we'll bring him in line for values.
Oh, no.
It doesn't work.
What's your advice on managing personal finance well?
So for the first 23 years of my career, I had zero savings. My savings began only after I went to Saudi Arabia as
Okay.
chairman of Unilever Arabia. And so my experience of wealth management, if that is the right word, or managing your savings, is only 30 years old. And I must say that I was very disappointed with the international wealth managers because I had dollar and
Hmm.
considerable savings in
Hmm.
working abroad, tax free.
Hmm.
I entrusted it to international wealth managers and they were unmitigated disasters. And over a period of 10 years, I lost faith in them. Now, they were disasters in the sense they didn't take $100 and reduce it to zero. Thank God for that. But $100 stayed at 99 or 100. It didn't become 101 even.
Because it went into their pockets.
And they would give me all sorts of such clever explanations that I wouldn't even understand. And so after 9 years, I said, if I can't understand it, then why am I doing it? This is my money, yeah, not that guy's money. And I knocked out international wealth managers. And in a moment of, what do you say for that word in English? Greed, I suppose,
Hmm.
or hope. I trusted Indian wealth managers. That was not such an unmitigated disaster, but it wasn't great
Mm-hmm.
because the fund manager has so many people to deal with. There is a relationship manager, he doesn't have time for you. I then found a particular guy who had time for me, who would ring me up and say, I think we should get out of this, we should get into that. Ultimately, it comes back to people power, because he
Hmm.
seemed to take interest in me. He would come and tell me, I am feeling nervous for you. I don't want to go into equity at this stage. Or
Mm-hmm.
you got too much equity and this is not the way to balance your portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
And it is his manner. It's like a doctor. All doctors have learned the same Vaidya. But the
Hmm.
guy with a good bedside manner, somehow you
Hmm.
think is a better doctor.
Hmm.
So a good wealth manager without good relationships is quite useless.
Hmm.
That's my experience. But if there's a wealth manager who's good, he doesn't have to be brilliant. I trust a good, not brilliant wealth manager, but who's got a good bedside manner. And very few wealth managers are in that category. Most of them come reeking of money. But you occasionally find a few guys who have that insaniyat in them.
And it worked for you?
Yeah, it worked for me. And I was comfortable. And the next 15 years, that's what I did. And I accepted. By this time, remember, I was also much older. And I
Hmm.
had shifted from being aggressive to conserving whatever savings I had.
Hmm.
It worked for me. And then after I retired fully, I have decided that I will go into very high growth equities, which are safe and sound, like the companies I've studied.
Okay.
I'd rather trust Hindustan Lever and TCS with my money because I understand these companies. I know the management is sound. I know that they have good corporate governance. They are not in it for a quick buck. They are not trying to pull out money from here and put it there. And they are not cyclical industries. They have a track record of 30 years. I mean, they've grown. TCS chairman announced yesterday at the AGM that in a 15-year period, they've grown 3,000%.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, it may not grow 3,000% in the next 15 years, but if it grows 1,000%,
It's good enough.
I'm home and dry.
Amazing. And I just want to say thank you to you for giving me
Thank
time
you. I
and
don't know if this is what you wanted, but I've said,
then
आपने कहा
no,
ना दिल से बोलो. So I've
then
done that.
I think it's great. It's really great. And while even I interviewing it, I learned so much from you. So, it's my golden moment, and I hope I can someday pay you back for that. But
All the best. Thanks
thank
a
you
lot.
so much. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.